What's up, NBA fans? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew, Shy, Kelvin, and Jermaine, and our newest members, Sigmund, Lawrence, and Trav, Big Trav. They have joined the crew. They have joined the network, and I appreciate y'all, fam. And we're going to make this thing go. We're going to make this thing happen. And with everyone's contributions to Behind the Bench podcast, we have now, because of multiple subscribers, over 400 subscribers at this time, we have generated over 90,000 views with the support of all the subscribers who have chosen to support Behind the Bench. So the crew will continue to deliver great content. I enjoy listening to everyone's content and their view on sports, all sports, but particularly at this time of year, basketball and the NBA. And all subscribers, I just want to say, as I always say, continue to support Behind the Bench and help make this channel the best that it can be. Now, when I witnessed a moment like we did last night, it felt like one bad publicity stunt. When you see an all-time sports franchise, a franchise that I've been supporting and rooting for well over 4 decades, and tell you the truth, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and I'm still a Laker fan at heart, always will be, but what's going on now, there's no way. In your heart of hearts, when you truly understand what this franchise stood for, you can't even try to convince yourself or fool yourself to support what's going on. And the main reason that I cannot support it, what's going on right now, with the Los Angeles Lakers, by the way, that's what I'm talking about, is because of these gentlemen featured in this photo. Because of these young men who represented the franchise when we were starting all over after a transcendent all-time great player in Kobe Bean Bryant repped this franchise and played his entire career for this franchise for 20 years. As he was in the process of passing the torch to the senior member of this young core. This young core is that should be viewed in history as the most disrespected group of athletes, not just in the history of the NBA, but in the history of sports. But what's ironic is this all-time sports franchise, when you witness a moment like we saw last night and raising a so-called banner, a crown to celebrate a tournament 2 months in to an 82 regular season campaign of the NBA, it triggers that moment when you understood when this franchise was taking a whole nother direction. When they brought that one guy to this team that you couldn't afford to bring to this team, especially when you were starting all over again. When you understand that, man, it all takes you back to the true representatives of this franchise. The young men who rep the franchise proudly, where you didn't hear fans complain about lack of effort. That they played on both ends of the court, offensively and defensively. And to tell you the truth, they were more enjoyable to watch because they were the real players. They were the real Lakers. And it's a simple reason. See, when all this is over, fans of this franchise and the franchise itself is going to have to start all over again. When I mean all over again, we're going to have to start literally from scratch, as if in an ironic way that we never existed. We're going to have to operate initially like an expansion team. I honestly believe that in all my heart. You know why? Because the franchise has exhausted itself of all capital, talent, draft picks, salary cap, the history, and the misreputation of that history has now been exploited to the tilt. But it all started with undermining and relinquishing collectively 1 through 10, at least 1 through 10. Those players who we drafted from 2014 to 2018, when you look at how their careers have evolved, not only have they met the projection of what they was expected to do, but in some ways, a lot of the young men featured in this picture has exceeded expectations, and did so by being forced to reestablish their careers with franchises that had been struggling years before they got there, or who had to follow a situation where a superstar franchise player whose original team spent 7 to 8 years building around asked to be traded and go elsewhere. But you will hear people say, why haven't they won anything? Well, the answer is simple. Not just these 10 young men featured in this photo, but the other 4 draftees. Well, really, the other 3 draftees. Because in this picture, you don't see Thomas Bryant. You don't see Mo Wagner. You don't see people like that have contributed to the rebuilding and newfound success of franchises who have been struggling for years. But all those players were scattered across the entire NBA landscape to play for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different franchises in the NBA out of 30. There's 30 teams in the NBA. The real players of the Lakers, the young core, are proving to be collectively the greatest young core ever generated and drafted into this league. And as I continue to do these videos, like I'm setting a template. This is like an introduction, because the voices who cover the NBA, or even fans of the team itself, act like they never wore the uniform, and act like they were never exploited for a guy to come in to flip them over, to stack the deck, to bring in one star, superstar franchise player after the next. See, if they were really allowed to grow and develop and represent this franchise, the Lakers would be miles ahead where they are now. Would they have so-called won a championship? or would they have won a so-called championship in 2020? No, they wouldn't have. But the progression would have been more authentic. And once you establish the foundation, you're ready to dominate and be successful and be prominent for the next 10 plus years. When you see teams out there like the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Denver Nuggets, the defending champions, I should have mentioned them first, the Denver Nuggets, Oklahoma City Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the best record in the West. Oklahoma City is number 2 in the West. Denver is the defending champion, who have been dealing with injuries to key players like Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon. They still number 3 in the West. Sacramento Kings, who have not, prior to last year, been in the playoffs since 2005. And they forced Golden State Warriors to a 7th game of the first round series in the West, where Steph Curry had to play the game of his career for the Golden State Warriors to advance. That's how good Sacramento was last year. Then you had the Houston Rockets reestablishing themselves to where, as of right now, they're a 500 team where they're winning all but one game at home, right? Dallas Mavericks, right? They start over with young players, but they main players Luka Doncic, right? But they drafting players like Derek Lively, people like that, to move forward. That's why they felt they can move on from Christian Wood. And see, right now, the way the Lakers are operating, they have to rely on players who their former team no longer wanted, because they felt they improved by getting mainly drafted players. So this franchise has been so exploited over these past 5 years to where there is no significant drafted talent on this team, especially when you start talking about first round draftees. Because the Los Angeles Lakers, they feature Austin Reeves, and I believe he's a very he has great instinct for the game, and he plays hard. He's hard-nosed. But even he was undrafted. The only significant drafted player on his roster, but he doesn't get any playing time right now, is Max Christie, and he was drafted in the 2nd round. Outside of that, they have no drafted players on his roster that's going to get any clock. None. That's unprecedented in professional basketball. That's unprecedented in professional sports. Unprecedented. It's because these 10 men featured in this photo were all used as nothing more than pawns in the game. Well, no, actually, instead of playing checkers by exploiting them to the tilt, you should have played chess and used them as pieces for building blocks for a future that you could have had for the ages if you had just stayed the course. Because no player who the Lakers have brought to this franchise that were traded to this team last year and who they signed this past offseason could measure up to these 10 men right here. Not one. And one of those have returned back for his 2nd stint in D'Angelo Russell, who could be subject to being traded again. So his status is to be determined. So what I'm saying is, when you look at Lonzo Ball, when you look at Jordan Clarkson, when you look at Kyle Kuzma, when you look at Julius Randle, when you look at Brandon Ingram, when you look at Larry Nance Jr., when you look at Ivica Zubac, when you look at Josh Hart, even Alex Caruso coming through the G League, even the G League talent of this organization has been depleted. Then you even had someone like a Taylor Horton Tucker who was drafted in 2019, he was traded and shipped out of there a season and a half ago to bring in a guy who the Lakers wind up trading 5 months later. See, it's getting so, how can I say, it's borderline self-destructive what's going on with this franchise. That's where I believe the franchise is headed. And we look at all these other teams out here who stay the course with their young talent. All of them are flourishing. Not one. I'm not saying as far as being like going to win the championship this year, but man, they can sit there and say, man, we got a heck of a future for ourselves. That's what the Lakers gave up. And that's huge. That is huge. When you drafting one and done players that's coming in the league, mainly 18 years old, it's going to take about 4 years. It's going to look at Kobe Bryant. Look at Kobe Bean Bryant. He started his career at 18 years old. He had all the talent and skill there was coming to this league, but he still had to be given time to mature, adapt to the NBA game. You know what I'm saying? Then he had to get the physical maturity down. You know what I'm saying? And it took him 4 years. And by that 4th year, that's when the Lakers took off and started their next championship run. It takes about 4 years. Look at Oklahoma City Thunder. The people was laughing at Oklahoma City when they cleared out their top players and in return received a multitude of first-round picks. And the so-called experts thought they were crazy. Oh, man, you can't do nothing with draft picks. Yes, you can. You use draft picks to draft talent. Now look at them. Number 2 seed in the West. And they've blown out the Lakers and they've blown out the Phoenix Suns. And remember, they was missing their top pick last year in Chet Holmgren, who suffered a foot injury and missed the whole season. Now he's blocking shots like it's going out of style. They're not going nowhere no time soon. New Orleans Pelicans, courtesy of the Anthony Davis trade in 2019. They bringing in talent, man. Like it's like a continuous chain of young talent being drafted to their team. Now all of a sudden, they got a 6'10" guy, Trey Murphy. In his 3rd year, he's already 50, 40, 90. Split as a player. Not to mention Brandon Ingram, who's leading the league in mid-range points. Or points in the mid-range. It takes time. And that's what the Lakers gave up. And me as a fan, that's why I've been upset about this whole situation, because all the struggles that the Lakers have been having since that bubble, well, it's a byproduct of you mortgaging a decade off to begin with. So no matter what move they make, they can't find a solution because they relinquished not just the greatest young core ever, but you darn near did it within a 2-year span, which is unprecedented. And all the players that they've been rotating in out here like a Ferris wheel over the past 5 years, they can't last no more than 2 years tops. It's because you cannot fill the void left from relinquishing and mortgaging off all that talent. It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented. So when you look at the situation, that's why they have to over-exaggerate, right? The players who they continue to bring up in here and on a yearly basis, try to convince fans that they on their way, but they not. Because the players they bringing up in here ain't better than who they let go. The output is greater than the input. Like a Rui Hachimura, right? They rat and rave about Rui Hachimura, but he's not better than Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma won his starting job the first 2 months right after being traded to the Washington Wizards. Kuzma's getting you 23, 24 a game. Hachimura is going to give you what he's going to give you about 11, 12 tops. So how can Hachimura be better than Kyle Kuzma? He's not. Every time Julius Randle, who's the first player since Larry Bird back in 2021 to average 24, 10, and 6, while shooting 80% or above from the free throw line and 40% plus from three. The first player to do that since Larry Bird was Julius Randle. Every time he goes up against Anthony Davis, man, is basically a wash. It's neck and neck. Brandon Ingram can give you, now LeBron James, he's the more experienced player, but when you look at the metric and you gave up a player who could have been a cornerstone of fixture for your franchise, at least for 7 to 8 years, he could provide you the same, but there's elements of the game that Brandon Ingram, contrary to popular belief, is better at. Better free throw shooter, better mid-range shooter. And he can play off ball. You see what I'm saying? So the trade-off is monumental. And that's why the Lakers continue to struggle. And they have to over-exaggerate players they bring up in here and then celebrate a meaningless in-season tournament, which the league, I believe eventually within 2-3 years, they're going to scrap it because of the backlash from the greater basketball public at large. They're already mocking it as we speak because it's not a real championship to begin with, because it's staged as exactly what it is, a tournament which should not be associated with professional basketball anyway. This is pro ball. And another reason why it's counterproductive, and I'll round this out. Another reason why it's counterproductive is because teams should not be focused on winning anything in the first 2 months of the season. So this in-season tournament really is, it's like a sprint, but the real championship is the marathon. So if you use all your energy to win the sprint when you should be focused on performing in the marathon, then you could mess around and lose your way and lose your focus. While all these other top teams, they got their eyes on the prize. Instead of not just a mid-season tournament, an in-season tournament. So in close, like I said, I'm going to be talking about this a whole lot, man, because I know what we gave up. I know what we gave up. And I'm going to break the performance and the metric of each player who they wind up letting go and trading off. Just letting go for salary cap purposes or trading off to bring in superstars. I'm going to break it down one by one. You look at these 10 right here, and you add the right star player to anchor them, and you compare that potential to what's out there now, there's no way that a fan can say that a team featuring these real players couldn't outperform and beat what's out there right now. There's no way. Because by this time, they would have been full-fledged and the chemistry would have been down pat. And of course, they the true Lakers anyway. So I just want to drop that, man. I'm very excited about putting this together because I want to break this down stage by stage. I really want to break this down to understand, hopefully to get more people to understand what the Los Angeles Lakers gave up and why they're struggling right now. Because once you adapt that win now mentality, you're going to wind up losing more than you think you're going to win to begin with. And every potential a team that potentially could win a championship, if they eventually went on to become a dynasty, they did so by starting from scratch. Not even a super team can claim that they ever became a dynasty. That's the irony of all this. Look at all the teams that became dynasties, or that you view as a dynasty, that rolled for a long time and won for a long time, they all started from scratch when you didn't even see it coming until it hit. Then they became fixtures and mainstays, not just in basketball. It happened in football in each decade. In baseball too. So I just want to share that, break that down, and you know, I really want to do this right, because I respect what those young men did, because they repped the franchise when we were down. And the players that's on this team right now, they don't have the mindset to do that. They wouldn't do it. And the real young players, their young core, they're really an embodiment and a reflection of the player who should be viewed as the best who's ever played for this franchise, and Kobe Bean Bryant. Because Kobe repped the franchise when it was starting all over again, in a sense, after Shaquille O'Neal was traded to Miami, and Kobe Bryant repped the franchise. We were down, and then 4 years later, fulfilled the mission. It became champions once again. But until next time, this is JB for BTB, Behind the Bench.